Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, October 27th, 2021. The White House readies to distribute COVID-19 vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds as early as next week. We'll hear from the CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, who'll be having the final say on the emergency use authorization for the Pfizer vaccine in this age group. More hopeful words from Democrats that a deal may be near on the big social spending and tax bill. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer saying an agreement is within arm's length. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki saying that President Biden made progress in meetings with holdout Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. But now Senator Manchin raising some concerns about the latest funding proposal, a tax on the increase in stock value held by billionaires. Attorney General Merrick Garland getting more heated questions about his memo aimed at protecting school board members from violence and threats of violence. Republican senators on the Judiciary Committee accusing him of treating concerned vocal parents like domestic terrorists. And Secretary of State Antony Blinken announcing a new way for State Department personnel to share their policy ideas and concerns directly with the department's leadership. It's a reform in the shadow of the U.S. evacuation from Afghanistan when some say warnings about how chaotic it would be were not listened to sufficiently. We begin with White House COVID-19 response coordinator Jeff Zients laying out preparations for vaccinating 5 to 11-year-olds. This after a Food and Drug Administration Advisory Committee on Tuesday okayed Pfizer's coronavirus vaccine for these kids at a lower dose. It sends the recommendation to the full FDA and still to come next week, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
28 million young Americans would become eligible for protection from COVID-19 should the FDA authorize and CDC recommend the vaccine for children ages 5 through 11. States have now placed their initial orders of vaccine for kids. And upon FDA authorization of the vaccine, millions of doses will be shipped immediately to tens of thousands of pediatricians, family doctors, children's hospitals, community health centers, rural health clinics, and pharmacies. Providers, parents, and kids know and trust. The bottom line is that we will be ready immediately following FDA and CDC's decisions so that parents can get their kids vaccinated quickly, easily, and conveniently.
Jeff Zients is the White House COVID-19 response coordinator. At the end of the process, authorizing Pfizer's vaccine for emergency use for these young children will be the CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, and she was also part of today's virtual briefing.
As Jeff laid out, the regulatory process is underway to make COVID-19 vaccines available for children ages 5 to 11. And I wanted to step back and take a moment to put some of this into perspective. CDC's data presented at yesterday's FDA Advisory Committee showed that among all children ages 5 to 11, COVID-19 was one of the top 10 causes of death in the United States over the last year. Since the start of the pandemic, there have been more than 8,300 hospitalizations among children aged 5 to 11, and there have been 745 deaths in children less than 18. Hospitalization rates are 3 times higher for non-Hispanic Black, non-Hispanic African American Indian and Alaskan Native, and Hispanic children compared to non-Hispanic white children. Yesterday, an FDA advisory committee met and reviewed data from Pfizer that described COVID-19 vaccine efficacy in 4,500 children ages 5 to 11. The trial showed a vaccine efficacy rate of nearly 91% in preventing COVID-19 infection in children who did not have COVID-19 infection previously. As we anticipate authorization for vaccines for children, I want to emphasize ways we can continue to protect our children today. Surrounding our children with people who are vaccinated helps protect them against COVID-19. It's important that we continue to vaccinate as many adults as possible to provide protection to children in the community, especially those who may not be eligible for vaccination themselves. We must continue to help our children follow the prevention measures we know will keep them safe, continuing to wear masks in schools and other indoor settings, choosing outdoor settings, avoiding crowds and poorly ventilated spaces, and washing our hands often.
Dr. Rochelle Walensky chairs the CDC, Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. She also said regarding the COVID-19 pandemic in general, deaths in the U.S. have continued to decline recently, but the 7-day average of daily deaths still over 1,000 per day. And 67% of Americans ages 12 and up are fully vaccinated, and that means about 60 million Americans eligible to be vaccinated are not. Now to the budget talks. A news article from The Hill. Senators Joe Manchin, Democrat of West Virginia, and Kyrsten Sinema, Democrat from Arizona, met with White House officials for roughly 2 hours Wednesday as Democrats raced to try to lock down a deal on their social spending package. Cutting a deal with the two key moderates would give a big boost to President Biden and Democratic leaders who have struggled to break stalemates on key issues. That from The Hill. The Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, sounded upbeat when he opened the Senate session Wednesday morning.
Mr. President, yesterday was another productive day as we make progress towards finalizing President Biden's Build Back Better plan. After another vigorous, spirited caucus lunch, meetings continue with Senate colleagues and members of the White House, as well as with the President. An agreement is within arm's length, and we are hopeful that we can come to a framework agreement by the end of today. But we must continue working a little more to make sure it is the best deal possible for the American people. I am working especially hard to strengthen Medicare and make prescription drugs more affordable. Senator Sanders has worked hard to push for many of these Medicare provisions, and I support them. At its core, the goals of Build Back Better are about restoring the middle class in the 21st century, helping people who are in the middle class stay there, helping people who are struggling to get to the middle class to get there, and give more Americans the opportunity for good, fulfilling lives and better lives for their kids. And, of course, we must take bold action to tackle the climate crisis, which could overwhelm our globe all too quickly if we don't act. It's an agenda that favors not those at the very top, but everyday Americans who are struggling to achieve the American dream in the 21st century.
That's the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer on the Senate floor. Meanwhile, Senator Joe Manchin, one of those key moderates, met with reporters in the hallway of a Senate office building discussing his now daily discussions with President Biden over these budget matters, and also his reaction to the latest proposal to help pay for the spending plan, taxing those with more than $1 billion in assets or incomes over $100 million for 3 consecutive years when the value of their tradable stocks and other assets goes up, but has not yet been sold. Democrats saying this could raise $200 billion over 10 years to help pay for the roughly $2 trillion spending package that's under negotiation. Here is Senator Manchin.
You met at the White House last night. Yeah. You talked to the president. After your discussion with him, how realistic is it that the deal can be reached imminently, even as early as today, including on a billionaire's tax?
Well, which one you want to speak about first, the taxes or what?
Well, both, overall and the billionaire's
overall,
tax.
Absolutely, it can be. When I say a deal, we need to move forward. The president has made that very clear. He wants to move forward, and we owe it to the president to move forward. Take a vote on this, on the infrastructure bill. It's the only thing we have is bipartisan. Take a vote on that because the president is doing everything. He's working 24/7. I guarantee you, I've been with him most 24/7. And he's working as hard as he possibly can to get a good, solid deal. And, you know, he believes 100% of nothing is nothing. And he understands that. He's been here 36 years. He understands how the Senate works. So we had very good, very direct, very frank, very honest conversations. On the taxes, people are talking about tax this and tax that, and we'll change this, and wealth tax. First of all, I said this. Everybody in this country that has been blessed and prospered should pay a patriotic tax. If you're to the point to where you're able to use all of the tax forms, if you can, to your advantage, and you end up with a zero tax liability, but have had a very, very good life and you've had a lot of opportunities, there should be a 15% patriotic tax. That's me speaking. I'm not speaking for anybody else. But we've said, and we've all agreed on a 15% corporate tax. Well, people in the stratosphere, rather than trying to penalize them, we ought to be pleased that this country is able to produce the wealth. But with that, there's a patriotic duty that you should be paying something to this great country to give you the protection and the support and the opportunities. That's called a patriot. A patriotic tax will be nothing that we should be scorned about. It doesn't harm anybody.
So are you supportive of the billionaire's tax? Or are you supporting the
I'm
billionaire's
supporting
tax?
basically that we do, everyone should pay their fair share. And I've just tried to think of it. I don't like it. I don't like the connotation that we're targeting different people. There's people that basically, they've contributed to society, they've created a lot of jobs and invested a lot of money and give a lot to philanthropic pursuits. But it's time that we all pull together and row together, if you will.
Hold
on, we're going to go.
As that bill is written right now on the billionaire's tax, do
There's a
you
lot
like the
going
way
on.
that it's written?
There's a lot going on with that, and it's very convoluted.
And
So
then
I believe there's going to be, everyone's going to pay. I believe that we will end up where everyone must participate.
And then in terms of the White House meeting,
all these taxes places like the billionaire's tax are coming in very, very last minute. It seems to be a rush. How confident are you?
No. I think the
How
president.
confident are you that you can even pay for the whole package?
We're not doing everything today. We're not going to have a complete. The Senate's going to take time. You think it's going to happen today in the Senate? We're basically trying to agree to a framework, and the president's been very clear. He'll go over to the House and he'll basically explain to the House that I have a framework, but there's still an awful lot of work to be done, and we're going to have something happen. And you have to trust the president's given everything he has to make this happen. He's trying to meet everybody halfway, and I appreciate that because I've been through negotiations, and I can tell he has given everything he has to this. People have to respect that. Only thing we're asking for is vote on a piece of legislation that's already been bipartisan. I'll guarantee you, I'm dealing in good faith. I'm meeting with people I've never had, and I really enjoy it. I've never had the opportunity to know them before. We can sit down and work something out. Give us a chance.
Senator Joe Manchin meeting with reporters. He has been labeled one of the moderate Democrats in these negotiations, the other side calling itself the progressives. And one of those members, Joyce Beatty of Ohio, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, leading a news conference today with an update on their view of the talks.
While it's not a perfect ending, it is a lot of progress. And some of the most investments that have been made in our communities will happen because of members of the Congressional Black Caucus. We're not there yet, but shortly, we will be there, and we will see many of our priorities there. We will see many of the investments that we have been fighting for and working for and leading at the top of that list. I'm not going to give you a priority list, but I'll give you a teaser, and I'll say we'll be very pleased that housing and vouchers will be on that list. We'll be very pleased that HBCUs, Alma Adams is standing here with us, who is the chair of our HBCU caucus. And you'll see great progress there. You'll see child care, child's tax credit. You'll see coverage for more seniors and individuals with Medicaid.
Congresswoman Joyce Beatty at a news conference with other CBC members on Capitol Hill. Associated Press writing the quickening pace of negotiations comes as President Biden pressed to have a deal in hand ahead of the global summits. There's also a Sunday deadline to approve a smaller bipartisan roads and bridges infrastructure bill, a risk allowing funding for routine transportation programs to expire. But that $1 trillion bill has been held up by progressive lawmakers refusing to give their support without the bigger Biden deal. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, very first question to her today in the White House briefing room was about where things stand.
First, any updates on where things stand on negotiations? Does the president plan on going to the Hill today? And just give us a general update on where things stand.
Sure. Well, last night, as you all know, the president met with Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin in the Oval Office and continued to make progress on finalizing details as we work toward an agreement. This morning, we had a number of senior staff up on Capitol Hill. Many of them may still be there now. Steve Ricchetti, Louisa Terrell, Brian Deese, and others of the key negotiators, Susan Rice as well, I believe, were up there having conversations with members to move the ball forward. The president remains open to going up to the Hill. We haven't made a decision to do that, and we are making decisions hour by hour on what would be most constructive to move things forward.
White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, and with more on the budget bill negotiations, we're joined by Politico congressional reporter Antony Adragna. A headline from your colleagues at Politico Playbook reads, "Except for every sticking point, Dems are close to a deal." Does that sound about right?
It does. We keep hearing today about how this bill is 90% written, but the 10% that's left may be the biggest holdups. Things like, basic things like how to pay for the bill. Some of the key policy details are all still up in the air. It sounds like they're getting closer to a deal. There's some hope of being able to announce some sort of framework agreement that would allow them to move forward on a bipartisan infrastructure bill that's been held up for a while, but we're not there yet.
Are we getting any details about specifically what the sticking points are on the spending side and the revenue side? Are those leaking out?
It's been an interesting process because obviously all these things are interconnected. So there's been a cycle today where there was a billionaire tax proposal from Senate Finance Chair Ron Wyden that came out that then Senator Manchin said he didn't like. Now it seems like maybe he's softening a little bit on that objection, but as I said, these things are all interconnected, and so we're hearing, bits about this particular policy thing being out, this other thing being in, but really it's all a mess, and a lot of the big pieces are really still up in the air.
President Biden has been more deeply involved in the negotiations this week. White House says he could go back to Capitol Hill. Who would he talk to and about what?
If President Biden comes, I think what we'd be looking for is for him to really make the case that he's been involved in the process. He thinks that he's got the best deal that he can get, and that he'd like the caucus to, release their votes and vote for this bipartisan infrastructure package to, again, get that off the board. The idea being that there'd be sufficient details fleshed out with this reconciliation package that progressives would feel comfortable that they would have the support of all of the Democrats in both chambers and could get that infrastructure bill off the floor. And talking to some of the progressives at votes today, it's unclear if that would actually fly, but that seems to be the idea if President Biden comes to the Hill.
Well, on that, there was a public disagreement yesterday between Speaker Nancy Pelosi and the Congressional Progressive Caucus Chair Pramila Jayapal over whether they needed a framework or a full text of the larger social spending bill before working on or voting on the smaller $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill. Has that been sorted out?
No, is the short answer. Heard from several senior progressives today that said that they thought there'd be sufficient numbers in their caucus that, again, wanted to see the full legislative text of this reconciliation package before they'd move forward. Now, who's to say if the Speaker of the House, the President of the United States are all leaning on you to vote for something, how many of them actually stick to that? But they're certainly sticking to their guns and saying, if this bill is really 90% written, let's get the last 10% written, and then we can move forward with both bills together, which has been their long-standing position.
While all that's going on, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi asking the House Rules Committee to meet on Thursday to talk about the budget reconciliation bill that has not yet been written. What's going on there?
I think a lot of members have the same question. I think it's to generate momentum and to make it seem like things are moving forward. But the head of that committee, the Rules Committee, Jim McGovern, was the first to say, I need to have text before I can actually schedule the meeting. So I think that announcement took a lot of people by surprise, and it's still unclear at this stage, what exactly the committee would be considering, since at least 10% of the bill remains unwritten.
Antony Adragna is a congressional reporter with Politico and writes Congress Minutes for that publication. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Republicans, while they're not in the negotiating room, are reacting to the various Democratic proposals for spending and taxing as they're being released. On that billionaire's tax, it came from the Senate Finance Committee Chair Ron Wyden, Democrat from Oregon. And in a statement, he said, "We have an historic opportunity with the billionaire's income tax to restore fairness to our tax code and fund critical investments in American families." Today, Senator John Thune of South Dakota, the minority whip, took to the Senate floor to discuss it.
Mr. President, it's another day and another really bad idea coming from the Democrats to fund their reckless tax and spending spree. It seems like that to fund this massive amount of spending, they're trying desperately to come up with new revenue sources. So much so that as of yesterday, still under consideration was a tax on unrealized gains, in other words, on income that people haven't received yet. And to just put that into perspective, if carried to its full conclusion, if that became a precedent as part of tax policy in this country, and it never has been before, You could, to put it in terms that people would understand, a lot of people participate in a 401k, they have some sort of retirement plan from their employer, that if there was a gain in a particular year, say that the total value of their portfolio of assets that are in that retirement plan, in that 401k, went up by 20%, they could be taxed on that 20% even though they haven't received the income yet. That's what is being talked about here in terms of the precedent. Never before has that been attempted or tried or implemented in American history, where you would actually have a tax on income before people actually ever receive the income. And of course, if you carry that to its natural conclusion, as we all know, markets go up, markets go down. If you had a year where your total value went down by 20%, then what? Do you get a refund from the federal government? My understanding is that they would offer some sort of a tax credit in a case like that if you had a year when you had losses. But, I mean, just think about the precedent that that would establish, Mr. President, what that could mean for the American people if at some point the government literally could tax you on income that you hadn't received yet.
Senator John Thune on the Senate floor. On Wall Street today, the Dow was down 266 points, NASDAQ up a fraction, S&P down 23. This story from Roll Call. During his time on the Federal Trade Commission, Rohit Chopra made a point of scrutinizing the business practices of big technology companies such as Facebook, Google, and Amazon. Now, much to the delight of progressives in Washington, he appears to be bringing the same focus to his new job as leader of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Well, this issue came up today as Director Chopra testified before the House Financial Services Committee. He was asked by Congressman Ed Perlmutter, Democrat from Colorado, about a small business hit by a fine, but the director bringing in that other issue.
Mr. Huizenga and I, a number of years ago, had an issue where a title company in Michigan had the roof brought down on them. It was a $500,000 fine brought really out of nowhere. It seemed like that way to me. And so I just like to reiterate, in terms of just bringing the enforcement bludgeon, that there be an effort. And this is an anecdote. It doesn't happen all the time. But I think from my point of view, I want to make sure that we have good regulations in place, that you are following them, and you are giving businesses who might be under your jurisdiction an opportunity to correct whatever mistakes that they have made. Can you give me sort of your philosophy on this?
Yes, I've thought about this issue a lot. I think one of the things that drives me a little crazy is when federal agencies don't focus their efforts on nationwide or systemic or severe harm. And instead, I saw this at the FTC. On one hand, the FTC is letting Facebook and Google off the hook. On the other hand, chasing after small businesses, many of them, with questionable, strong-arming them into settlements. I believe that we should focus most of our resources on the largest firms that are engaged in nationwide harm, that are really, totally beyond the pale, where they clearly knew what the rules were often, where they clearly knew what they were doing, or they buried their head in the sand. Focusing on larger participants in the market, I think, is one of the best ways we can accomplish our mission. I don't know about the specific case you mentioned, and in fact, I don't know the facts. It may have been very severe. I just don't know. But that is generally my philosophy. And I think what we saw over the past many years under both Democrats and Republicans of failures at the FTC, I don't want to repeat that at the CFPB.
Okay. No, thank you. I appreciate your sharing that.
Congressman Ed Perlmutter and Rohit Chopra, director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, at a House Financial Services Committee hearing today. Chopra served as a Federal Trade Commission commissioner from 2018 until his confirmation as CFPB director earlier this month. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Download C-SPAN's new mobile app. And stay up to date with live video coverage of the day's biggest political events, from live streams of the House and Senate floor and key congressional hearings to White House events and Supreme Court oral arguments. Even our live, interactive morning program, Washington Journal, where we hear your voices every day. C-SPAN Now has you covered. Download the app for free today.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. This from CBS News. Attorney General Merrick Garland on Wednesday defended himself against claims from Senate Republicans that a memo he issued about violent threats to school board members could have a chilling effect on parents who are seeking to voice their concerns about their children's education. Garland's one-page memo issued October 4th has become a flashpoint in a broader battle waged by Republicans against the Biden administration in schools over mask mandates and the teaching of critical race theory. One of the Senate Republicans bringing this up with the Attorney General at the Judiciary Committee hearing today, Tom Cotton of Arkansas.
You've cited as the basis for that directive the National School Board Association's letter of September 29th. Was that directive being prepared before September 29th, before the School Board Association letter was issued?
I don't believe so. Certainly I didn't have any idea.
So it was only prepared okay, I think that answers the question.
I already answered that question
So you keep citing the school board letter and news reports.
Right.
One of the news reports cited in that letter, which you presumably mean, is from Loudoun County, Virginia.
No, that is not what I was talking about.
Well, you keep citing news reports, and that's the most prominent news report that anyone in America has seen. That refers to Scott Smith, whose 15-year-old daughter was raped. She was raped in a bathroom by a boy wearing girls' clothes, and the Loudoun County School Board covered it up because it would have interfered with their transgendered policy during Pride Month. And that man, Scott Smith, because he went to a school board and tried to defend his daughter's rights, was condemned internationally. Do you apologize to Scott Smith and his 15-year-old daughter, Judge?
Senator, anyone whose child was raped is the most horrific crime I can imagine, and is certainly entitled and protected by the First Amendment to protest to their school board about this.
But he was cited by the School Board Association as a domestic terrorist, which we now know that letter and those reports were the basis for your
Senator,
this is
that's wrong.
Shameful. Judge, this is shameful. This testimony, your directive, your performance is shameful.
Okay. That's not correct.
Thank God you are not on the Supreme Court. You should resign in disgrace, Judge.
General Garland, do you want to complete your answer on?
Okay, I wasn't sure there was a question there, but let me be clear. The news reports I'm talking about were not the news reports in that letter. They were other news reports that everybody here has heard about, subsequent reports that everybody has heard about. There is nothing in this memorandum, and I wish if senators were concerned about this, they would quote my words. This memorandum is not about parents being able to object in their school boards. They are protected by the First Amendment. As long as there are no threats of violence, they are completely protected. So parents can object to their school boards about curriculum, about the treatment of their children, about school policies. All of that is 100% protected by the First Amendment, and there is nothing in this memorandum contrary to that. We are only trying to prevent violence against school officials.
Attorney General Merrick Garland before the Senate Judiciary Committee. The questions from Senator Tom Cotton. Another issue at this hearing, the ongoing investigation into the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol by supporters of former President Donald Trump, looking to interrupt the counting of the electoral vote by Congress certifying President Joe Biden's victory. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat from Rhode Island, bringing this up.
I've been pursuing the question of the department's investigation into January 6th since pretty early days, starting with a letter in January 8th that asked about the resources that were being deployed into this investigation and whether prosecution task force was being set up and so forth. And then another letter, February 24th, with regard to domestic extremist violence groups' potential role. We've learned a little bit more now, and we've learned that there was a lot of money sloshing around in the background behind the January 6th rally and behind the raid, the riot in the Capitol. For instance, we know that the Bradley Foundation, which is a big funder, gave money to Turning Point USA and to Public Interest Legal Foundation. And it gets even more interesting because Turning Point USA has a twin called Turning Point Action, 501c3, 501c4 combo, which also got money from the Judicial Crisis Network to support the so-called Italygate, the debunked Italygate theory. At the same time, the Public Interest Legal Foundation had as its director Mr. Eastman, who was cranking out his fanciful memo for President Trump how to overturn the election. The Judicial Crisis Network is the same thing from a corporate standpoint as something called the Honest Elections Project, which was bringing a fanciful case in Pennsylvania regarding election fraud. And the Judicial Crisis Network was also funding RAGA, the Republican Attorney General's Association, which was making robocalls to get people to come to the riot. Now, I don't know what's going on behind all of that, but I am hoping that the due diligence of the FBI is being deployed not just to the characters who trespassed in the Capitol that day and who engaged in violent acts, but that you're taking the look you would properly take at any case involving players behind the scenes, funders of the enterprise, and so forth in this matter as well. And there's been no decision to say, we're limiting this case just to the people in the building that day. We're not going to take a serious look at anybody behind it.
Senator, I'm very limited as to what I can say.
I understand that.
We have a criminal investigation going forward.
Please tell me it has not been constrained only to people in the Capitol.
The investigation is being conducted by the prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office and by the FBI field office. We have not constrained them in any way.
Great. And the old doctrine of follow the money, which is a well-established principle of prosecution, is
it's fair to
alive
say,
and well.
It's fair to say that all investigative techniques of which you're familiar, and some maybe that you're not familiar with because they post-date your time, are all being pursued in this matter.
Thank you.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse questioning the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. Another issue at today's Judiciary Committee hearing, as the Washington Examiner puts it, Attorney General Merrick Garland said the Justice Department continues to stand by the findings of the DOJ watchdog that fired FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, that he lied under oath to investigators during a leak investigation despite the Biden DOJ reversing his firing and settling his lawsuit against it with a big payout. That came up with Republican Senator Chuck Grassley.
The nonpartisan Justice Department Inspector General established that Andrew McCabe lied under oath to FBI investigators. He lied under oath to the Justice Department Inspector General. It should also be noted that McCabe leaked government information to the media and then called the New York and Washington FBI field offices and blamed them for the very leaks that he caused. Under your leadership, instead of punishing him, the department reinstated his retirement, expunged his records as part of the settlement. He will reportedly receive $200,000 in retirement back pay, and his attorney will reportedly receive $500,000 in legal fees. So it seems to me that that's beyond incredible. So General Garland, did you authorize the McCabe settlement? And if not, who did?
Senator, the McCabe settlement was the recommendation of the career lawyers litigating that case based on their prospects of success in the case. The case did not involve the issues about lying. It involved a claim that he was not given amount of time necessary to respond to allegations. And the litigators concluded that they needed to settle the case because of the likelihood of loss on the merits of that claim. The Inspector General's report still stands. We have not questioned in any way the Inspector General's findings. The reference with respect to false statements was made to the Justice Department in the previous administration and declined in the previous administration. The only issue here was an assessment of litigation merits.
Short follow-up. Do you agree with the taxpayer, since you didn't somebody else authorized it. Do you agree with the taxpayer picking up a multi-million-dollar bill for someone that lied under oath to government officials?
I think the assessment made by the litigators was that the bill to the taxpayers would be higher if we didn't resolve the matter as it was resolved.
Attorney General Merrick Garland with Senator Chuck Grassley, Republican from Iowa and the ranking member on the Judiciary Committee. That McCabe case involved the leak of sensitive information to the Wall Street Journal that revealed the existence of an FBI investigation into the Clinton Foundation several years ago. Attorney General testifying for about 4 hours before the Senate Judiciary Committee. We covered it all. You can find the video at cspan.org. An AFP story begins. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken promised Wednesday to welcome and respond to all internal dissent and to review any missteps in the evacuation from Afghanistan. In July, diplomats sent a dissent cable to Blinken warning that Afghanistan's government was collapsing more quickly than anticipated and urging an immediate airlift. The Biden administration responded by stepping up visas for vulnerable Afghans, but did not start a massive airlift until weeks later when it became clear the Taliban was taking over. Reporting from AFP. Secretary Blinken speaking today at the Foreign Service Institute, that's the State Department's training center in Arlington, Virginia, just across the Potomac River from Washington.
We will elevate new voices and encourage more initiative and more innovation. We're launching a new Policy Ideas channel. Employees at any level, anywhere in the world, will be able to share their policy ideas directly with department leaders. We know they have fresh and creative thinking. We value their perspectives, and we believe that good ideas are good ideas wherever they come from. So let's make it easier for your good ideas to be heard by people making the decisions. I've also revitalized the dissent channel because dissent is patriotic. And it shouldn't just be protected, it should be and it will be welcomed. I'm reading and responding to every dissent that comes through the channel. And I hope the dissent channel will encourage a culture of constructive, professional dissent more broadly throughout the department, because dissent makes us stronger. We also want to hear more from the American people. Our mission is to deliver for them and all those who have an equity in the work that we do. Too often, our communication is a one-way street. We talk, and we hope they listen. We've got to do more listening. And that's not just the right thing to do, it's the necessary thing to do. Because if key stakeholders aren't with us on the takeoff, they're less likely to stick with us on the landing. We need their ideas, and we need their buy-in. So, I'll be asking all senior officials to make domestic travel and engagement a greater priority. And that includes senior leaders at posts who can engage virtually. We're going to reach out much more regularly to civil society groups, private companies, state and local governments, community organizations, universities. And we'll make sure that we're connecting with people from different parts of the country, urban and rural, because our mission isn't to serve some Americans, but all Americans. We're diplomats, and we're going to focus more of our diplomacy here at home to make sure our policies reflect the needs, the aspirations, the values of the American people.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the Foreign Service Institute in Northern Virginia. Part of a speech on modernizing the State Department, he also had plans for a new cyber bureau and a greater focus on global challenges such as climate change and public health. State Department today also announcing it's issued its first passport with an X-gender designation in recognition of the rights of people who do not identify as male or female, and expects to be able to offer this option broadly next year. An article at Fox News on a related issue. House Intelligence Committee Chair Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, declared diversity the greatest national strength of the U.S. on Thursday and lamented that the intelligence community often brought white males to testify before his committee. Ranking Member Devin Nunes, Republican from California, worried in his opening statement that diversity efforts might distract from critical functions of the IC. One of the witnesses at the hearing, the CIA Director William Burns.
Strengthening diversity and inclusion at CIA is among my highest priorities as director. It's not only the smart thing to do for an agency with a global mission It's the right thing to do for an agency that represents and defends our diverse society. Simply put, we can't be effective and we're not being true to our nation's ideals if everyone looks like me, talks like me, and thinks like me. Today at CIA, 45% of our workforce are female and 26% are minority. Last year's new hires were among our most diverse in recent years, with 46% female and 27% minority. Our challenge in the years ahead is not only to strengthen those numbers in our recruitment, but also to reinforce retention and ensure a clear professional pathway to the senior ranks for deserving officers, whatever their background. We're making progress. This past spring's Senior Intelligence Service promotion list, the first I approved as director, was 43% female and 25% minority. Moreover, a majority of the senior leadership team appointments I've made in 7 months as director are female and nearly a third are minority. But we still have a long way to go. We have 4 broad goals to strengthen diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility at the agency. First, we'll create greater diversity in our hiring pipeline and increase the onboarding rate for minority applicants. We are intensifying our outreach to 130 schools across all 50 states. As part of this effort, we're going to expand our engagement with colleges and universities identified as minority-serving institutions. So far this year, we've engaged with 34 MSIs. We've also selected senior officers to serve as champions for 10 of those schools. And under our new Directorate of Analysis Fellowship Program, we plan to provide annual tuition assistance of up to $37,000 to select students from minority-serving institutions who apply to the DA. The agency must also urgently reform our onboarding process and remove barriers to recruiting a diverse workforce. For example, our Talent Center aims over the next 2 years to reduce the current median time from application to clearance from over 600 days to no more than 180 days. Longer waiting times have historically disadvantaged minority applicants, many of whom don't have the means to remain in lengthy pipelines.
CIA Director William Burns, part of his testimony before the House Intelligence Committee today. The 3 other goals that he laid out include increasing diversity in senior agency roles, promoting diversity into job performance evaluation, and creating a more inclusive culture at the CIA. Other witnesses today, the Director of National Intelligence, the Directors of the National Security Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency, and the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security. C-SPAN covered this hearing as well, and you can find the full video at cspan.org. From Great Britain's Evening Standard, they write, Ed Miliband rolled back the years as he deputized for the Labour leader at Prime Minister's questions and challenged Boris Johnson to offer more than climate delay at COP26. Shadow Energy Secretary Mr. Miliband was a late replacement for Sir Keir Starmer, who was required to isolate after testing positive for COVID-19. This is what it sounded like. You're going to hear first from the Speaker of the British House of Commons, Lindsay Hoyle.
Unfortunately, the Leader of the Opposition is isolating, so I'm calling Ed Miliband to ask the question on behalf of the Opposition. Ed Miliband.
Thank you. Just like the old day.
Just to say, I presume you all want to get onto the budget, because all you're doing is delaying it. Ed Miliband.
I just want to reassure both sides of the House it's one time only that I'm back. Mr. Speaker, we all need the vital COP26 summit in Glasgow to deliver next week, because failing to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees will have devastating consequences for our planet, and that is shared across this House. Does the Prime Minister agree that to keep that goal of 1.5 degrees alive, we need to roughly halve global emissions in this decisive decade?
Well, I welcome the right honourable gentleman to his place, and indeed, I think the whole House will extend our sympathies to the Leader of the Opposition. I hope he returns soon. It is, of course, correct, Mr. Speaker, that COP26 is both unbelievably important for our planet, but also very difficult. And it's in the balance, Mr. Speaker. And he's right in what he says about the need to keep 1.5 degrees alive, and that will be, and it does depend on what happens this decade. It depends on the commitments that are made. All I will say, Mr. Speaker, is that already very substantial commitments under the UK presidency designate of COP have been achieved, and we've moved from only 30% of the global economy committed to a net zero by the middle of the century to now 80%. And every day as I talk to international leaders, we hear further commitments to make those solid commitments that the world will need. Whether it is enough, Mr. Speaker, I'm afraid it is too early to say.
The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, leader of the Conservative Party, questioned by Ed Miliband of the Labour Party, former leader of that party, of the opposition from 2010 through 15. He resigned after Labour's defeat in the 2015 general election, filling in for the regular Labour leader Keir Starmer, sidelined with COVID-19. And this from The National in Great Britain. Senior members of the British royal family, including Prince Charles and the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, will appear at the opening of the COP26 Climate Change Summit. Announcement comes after Queen Elizabeth II announced on Tuesday that she would not attend the evening reception and will instead record a message for world leaders. The Queen recently in the hospital. She's 95 years old. The conference runs October 31st through November 12th. And thanks for listening today. For more top Washington stories every day, subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word at c-span.org/connect. And I hope you have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Every day we take your calls live on the air on the news of the day, and we discuss policy issues that impact you. Coming up Thursday morning, we'll discuss the latest on President Biden's Build Back Better agenda with Texas Republican Congressman August Pfluger and Illinois Democratic Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. Watch Washington Journal live at 7 Eastern Thursday morning on C-SPAN or on C-SPAN Now, our new mobile app. Join the discussion with your phone calls, Facebook comments, texts, and tweets.